Good morning and welcome to FREA's Manic Monday. It's a Monday morning and it is the 21st of March. March is rolling along. Yesterday was the first official day of spring. And welcome to our conversation today. My name is John Green with Association Member Benefits Advisors, joined by your Executive Director, Ann Fagan. And today we're going to talk about the basics of long-term care. Before we do and jump off into that, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping notes while we have some folks joining us here. We do record every one of these sessions, and we make that available out on the FREA website after the webinar, sometime usually middle of the week or so. We get that posted out there for you, so you can always send it to a friend, follow up, take notes, watch a little bit more, things like that as well. All participants today are in a listen-only mode, and so unlike a normal Zoom call, you'll only be recognized if you raise your hand, or if you want to ask a question, drop it into chat or Q&A. That's the best way to keep that conversation going. Ann and I will answer those questions. If it's something specific to FREA or specific to your issue, she may type it in response back to you. We may stop the conversation and answer that. And then what we've done lately is we'll stop the conversation at the end of our presentation today and just open it up for questions. And you'll be able to use that toolbar for your reaction bar and just hold up your hand. We can unmute you and you can ask the question live on the air if you don't feel comfortable chatting or putting it into Q&A as well. You'll also notice the QR code down here. You're going to see this QR code 2 or 3 times throughout our conversation today. It gives you a chance, if there's something specific that we talked about today that you want more in-depth information on, that you can take your smartphone, hover over that QR code, a little form will pop up. I'll show you what that looks like here a little bit later, but you can ask your question that way or get more information on topics we've discussed today. So grab a pen and paper. We're going to kind of give you a combination, the best of the highlights of our long-term care 101 and 201, and put them together in one big sandwich and just talk about that today. But before we do that, Ann, I know it's getting to be extremely busy season there. So I know you're in preparation for the convention, so tell us about that in a moment, but kind of talk to us a little bit about a segue into our conversation today.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Welcome again, everybody. We're so glad you're here. And this is Manic Monday, and we are manic. The office is gearing up heavily. People have gotten their notices to get their delegates in. We have convention coming up the end of May. It's going to be an amazing convention. John has been invited to join us to do a presentation in case his boss hasn't told him yet. And so good. So John will be there with us for one of our breakout sessions. We're going to have Alexander from AMBA there for breakout. We're going to be doing a picnic dinner and a movie with showing The Wizard of Oz on the big screen. And when was the last time you got to see that? We are also on Wednesday night going to do a costume contest. We're going to have karaoke. We're going to have dancing, and we're going to have a wonderful Kansas City down-home barbecue buffet. So the theme obviously is The Wizard of Oz, and it's all about the fact that we are celebrating the fact that we are not hiding in our homes anymore, and we are able to get out and work together as a team. And the reason we work together as a team is to save our pension. Legislative session is over. They did not attack the pension fund this year. That doesn't mean they're not going to next year, because it's not an election year next year. So we are already gearing up our legislative committee, and we are doing a lot of things. We have a new poll that came out that showed that 83% plus of people in the country and in Florida, K through 12 teachers should be paid more, should have pension funds. So the public is on our side on this one. So we're going to be using that with the legislators. This graphic here, the little houses in the corner are tiny homes. And St. Pete does a tiny home festival. And that's where these pictures are from. And they are the coolest thing. If your kids have any land in your backyard, it's a big thing. People are putting up tiny homes for those of us who are aging, and we get to live there all by ourselves and the kids can't come in, kind of a thing. Or there's other alternatives, and I am not the expert on that, John is. But as you can see from this slide, we are no longer, as we grow older, relegated to nursing homes. The baby boomers have once again changed the world around them, and again, for the better. So with that, I'm going to let John take it away and explain how all this works.
Thanks, Ann. I appreciate it. Looking forward to coming back down there, being with your group in late May. So I was excited whenever my boss said, John, we expect you to be there. So anytime I get a chance to come to Central Florida, I'm glad to do it, but especially to be back with everyone in person. And we're excited about that. And I will tell you, these tiny homes, the baby boomers have made that a big deal. And what there's, some of them are pretty nice. They're called granny pods. And they really outfit these granny pods. And we've looked at one for my mother with the latest technology that shows, well, there hasn't been movement in a while, or there's cameras at a low level surface in the tiny house, the granny pod. So it's really pretty impressive. But as Ann mentioned, your generation is changing the way of the conversation of aging in place and how we go into our latter years in a more graceful manner or with control. And we want to talk about that today, because really the biggest thing is you've worked all your life. And it was always put to me when I was younger, why would you ever want to work all your life to have somebody else determine how you're going to live your final years? And this is where we're having this discussion today. But before we do this, just a quick reminder, my name is John Green with Association Member Benefits Advisors. We partner with FREA to provide you with benefits, discounts, and all that kind of fun stuff that you can only get exclusively through your membership. I live a little bit north of Houston with my wife, who is a second grade teacher. She teaches at the school where she and my 3 kids all grew up and went to elementary school. I have spent most of my career in schools helping teachers understand what their retirement years are going to look like. And if we're not in Texas doing that, I love to be down in Central Florida as much as possible. So I'm looking forward to getting back down there. Just got back last week. And mentioned that the legislative session is wrapped up. That's a good thing. Whenever there's no news, that's great news for retirees usually, because your association fights very hard. And most members are part of the association to protect what you've worked for, that pension out there, to preserve any benefits, any type of cost of living increases, things like that that come across the board. But FREA, especially now that we're seeing coming out of COVID, for lack of a better term, keeps you connected to your members, to your local community. Those of you who have taught for many, many years are now retired and enjoying that. And then partnering with AMBA to make sure that you've got important discounts, exclusive benefits, things like that, things of that nature. AMBA has been around for a little over 40 years, based out of Austin, Texas, but we now serve a 70 plus associations just like FREA, retired educators, state employees, firefighters, police officers, and nurses, public servant organizations, people who have taken care of us and taken care of our kids. We're now giving back. We want to do that. We represent associations like that in over 40 states. You have 3 leaders that are responsible for your area: Sam Palett in the northern panhandle part, and then Alexander in the southern part of the state, and Eric Cannon in the central part of the state. All 3 of these gentlemen love to take care of you. And that way, if you see their call, you hear their voice, you know who they are. They'll be glad to take care of you there. There are some advantages of FREA and AMBA being together. They kind of fill those gaps, those benefits that you may be missing whenever you left the schoolhouse, or with Medicare or some of your other plans that you may have. They fill those gaps out there. They're portable for whatever reason if you leave the state. We have many members of FREA who taught in Florida, but now have moved somewhere else in the country to be with grandkids, things like that. So you can take these benefits wherever you go. You can extend these benefits to family members, whether it's adult children who have aged out of benefits that you have, or whether it's to your parents. And the conversation that we're talking about today really is fitting from a parent discussion. We're going to talk about this whole concept of long-term care insurance, what that means, the different terms, and we're going to talk about what qualifies, what doesn't qualify, what Medicare pays, doesn't pay. We're going to go kind of look at the myths surrounding long-term care and let in perfectly with how what long-term care used to be in our minds was nursing home. That's all you had. There are many different components out there that can change how you receive your care and how to help you understand what your endorsed options are through the association. But before we do this, let me go ahead and let's take a quick poll just to understand who our folks are out here on the call. It'll help me with my conversation today. So this is an anonymous poll. feel free to answer the question. If you've got some sort of long-term care plan right now, that will help me gear my conversation and presentation that way. So jump in and answer that, and we'll see what our mix is here in just a moment. All right, just a few more seconds out there, and I'll publish this poll. Okay. One more shot there. All right, I'm going to share the results here. It's a pretty good group here. We've got 50% of you, which I applaud you, have some sort of long-term care plan. About a third of you know. And I applaud those of you that are honest and say, I'm not sure. Because sometimes you think you may have had something through a district, or you may have something through a spouse, or that you may have gotten, but you're not quite sure. And that's okay, because we're going to talk about all the different components. We're going to talk about what Medicare does and doesn't pay for, and help answer your questions along the way. So if you've got questions as we walk through here, again, feel free to drop those in the chat. We'll answer those questions as we go through. We'll answer them at the end. And then at the end, if you didn't feel comfortable typing it in and just want to ask a question out loud, you can raise your hand and we'll recognize you and go forward that way. So the reason why I give this conversation is because it was very personal to me. This is my father and I in Austin, Texas, at his nursing home. He had dementia, vascular dementia, and this was in July of 2020. Was the last time that he remembered who I was when I came to visit him. His birthday was pretty close to that. He was 80 years old on his birthday in July of 2020. And last time that he remembered me, he passed away in October of that year of complications of dementia. He spent the last 2 years of his life in a nursing home, or in 2 different nursing homes, as a result of complications from a stroke and dementia. Because he planned early, it really lessened the burden on my stepmother, my brother, and I, because he took care of those things. And so I kind of give this conversation from my perspective, because I saw how his long-term care planning impacted my family. And I learned the different components of Medicare. I learned how nursing homes work, things like that. So it informs how my conversation is today. And it informs why I'm passionate about this topic, simply because there are so many things in my mind that I want to make sure everyone is aware of here. But before I do this, I love doing this with retired teachers. I want to give you a quick pop quiz. I want you to answer true or false to these 6 questions. True or false, long-term disability and long-term care are the same thing. True or false, very few people need extended care. True or false, only people over 50 need long-term care. Nursing home confinement is the only long-term care option. True or false, Medicare pays for everything. And I should just wait till I'm retired. When I say retired, meaning I'm not doing anything. Wait as long as I can. So if you answered true to any one of these questions, every one of these questions is false. And we're going to explore those conversations today, go a little bit more in depth and help you understand what's out there. There's some good news, bad news in the world of extended care, long-term care, or care for us as we age here. The good news is advances in diagnosis and treatment are so much better that what used to be a diagnosis for cancer, heart attack, or even a stroke that in the past would sometimes be an immediate need to go to some type of long-term care situation. Now the treatments are so much better. So the life expectancies are climbing. All those are good things. And the variety of care options are increasing. That first slide that Ann showed, all the different levels of assisted care, active care, retirement communities, all the way to nursing care. Variety is huge these days. No longer is it, I can't take care of you at home, you have to go to a nursing home. That type of situation, much better. On the flip side, though, our population is aging significantly. We're not replacing it with younger people. We're not continuing to grow on the younger side. So the need is higher, puts a demand upon services, whether it's home health care services or services in some type of facility. That's driving the cost up. What we also see is that smaller families reduce that care pool. I think about my grandparents, and both sets of my grandparents were anywhere from 7 to 10 kids on each side of their family. So there was always somebody in the family that took care of somebody if there was a need. Now you've got smaller families with 1, 2, 3 kids max, so it reduces that care pool there. And as companies got smarter, or I don't say smarter, they understood what their exposures were, they started restricting policy language. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Medicare stayed way ahead of this and got out of the long-term care game a long, long time ago. And they've really changed their language on what they cover. Companies started increasing their premiums, they're changing their coverages, things like that, giving larger elimination periods. So we're going to give you some sort of a look at the components of a policy, but just know that companies started changing those policies, and I'll show you why in a moment. And then all of a sudden, COVID-19 hit. And thankfully, those of you living in Florida, in Texas, the world is coming back to much more of a normal state. But the law changes around COVID-19 greatly impacted the nursing home and the assisted care and the home healthcare industry. What I didn't realize, and something I learned with my father, because he was in a nursing home prior to COVID, and then COVID hit. And of course, as you know, we had greatly restricted access. We could only go in one at a time, maybe one caregiver, one family member could ever go in, things like that. What I learned was that many facilities have staff members that rotated around to multiple facilities, physical therapists, certain care facilities, certain specialists, things like that. When COVID-19 came in and the laws changed, you could only have one facility that you worked at. Well, that caused a great backlog of staffing that needed to be done, things like that. So it really impacted nursing home communities much more acutely in the COVID-19 world, and the laws that changed around that. So all of those things kind of add up to a little bit of a challenge. And this is the situation that you see here on this graphic. Back when you were teaching, back in the 90s, all the way up to 2000, there was a significant increase in people saying, I saw my parents or my grandparents go through some type of long-term care need. I need to get a policy. I need to get something upon myself or my parents that would take care of them in their final years. So you saw an increase in these policies. You saw a lot of school districts offer these policies in a group setting where you would come in, there was really no underwriting. You could just take it based on your age and you got a set type of policy. We'll talk about that in a moment. Well, all of a sudden the year 2000 hit and companies started seeing an increase in people going on claim, customers going on claim that they were not anticipating. Again, all those good things like we talked about, earlier diagnosis, treatment, living longer, things like that, really cost insurance companies quite a bit. So they started increasing premiums, tightening up underwriting, making it much more difficult to qualify. And they started raising prices in hopes that people would drop their policy, that they'd never go on claim. And all of a sudden, now we fast forward to now 2022, you've got very few people that take out a long-term care policy simply because there's not as many companies selling it. It becomes more expensive and it's a little bit more restrictive. So you find people, for those of you, the 50% of you on this call today that may have a long-term care policy, you may be in this situation where you're seeing some periodic rate increases over time, or carriers offering to levelize your coverage and reduce your premium, but never increase your coverage as you go forward. Or that when it's time to go on claim, meaning that you need to activate your parent's long-term care policy, you have a pretty sizable waiting period before your policy pays. And that's a lot of money out of your pocket. Or some of you may have taken out this policy many years ago, but those coverages don't match what the need is now because the cost of care has gone up dramatically. We're going to explore that in just a moment. And then some policies we find, when you took them out, they were really just designed for nursing home only care. They weren't designed for someone to come take care of you in your home or provide care that on a non-skilled basis, something like that. You can't get care where you want to. So all of those things have kind of changed the current environment in the long-term care, and I use that as a big picture term, world. What hasn't changed out there is that 70% of us, once we reach age 65, are going to need some form of extended care. And that doesn't mean like my father necessarily, where you go into a nursing home and that's where you spend the last couple of years of your life. What it means is that you're going to have someone take care of you for a greater period than 3 months, meaning that it's either a result of a fall, hip replacement, knee replacement, something like that, memory care issues, things of that nature. So a significant number of us, once we reach age 65, are going to need care in our lifetime. And it's important for us to prepare for that. We're going to talk about how people pay for it and how that works. I want to show you a little bit of the current realities in the long-term care world today. And I want you to write these numbers down. This is why, if you have a plan already, you should review this plan. If you don't have a plan or you're not sure, AMBA can help you as well, but you need to look at what the numbers are out there so that you can kind of define your plan, what's best for you. The average amount of time that someone spends in an assisted living facility. Now, that's a period of place to where you live by yourself, but you've got meals prepared for you, and you've got some care if you need it from a health standpoint, not continuous care, is 28 months, so a little over 2 years. But over half of those people, close to 60% of the people who start in an assisted living facility are going to move to a skilled nursing facility at some point in their life. So you can see that there's that transition, that more than half will go over to that skilled nursing facility. The average stay in a nursing home is 2.2 years. So think about that from the standpoint of a plan. But for Alzheimer's, that average stay is 9 years. And what we're finding with Alzheimer's patients is that there are people who are contracting or seeing the impact of Alzheimer's at a younger age, and they live longer. So the care, if you've got a family history of Alzheimer's, you may want to plan for a little bit longer stay in that situation there. The one stat that jumped out at me significantly is this differentiation between men and women in a nursing home facility. Men spend an average of 8 months in a nursing home facility, where women will spend 2.5 years in a nursing home facility. What usually we find out is that the man will stay at home, and they will stay at home as long as the spouse can take care of him till she wears herself out. He then has to go into a nursing home facility, passes away, and then she has to follow not too far after because she wore herself out taking care of him. And then this other stat that kind of surprised me until I got to thinking about it is that 47% of nursing home residents stay less than 100 days. I want you to write down that 100 days, because that has a lot to do with Medicare. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So write that 100 days down, and you see that that almost half of anybody who needs to go to a nursing home will only stay for 100 days. And it's usually a money issue. It's not a because they pass away issue. It's a money issue. And we'll talk about that as we go forward here. So real quickly, I want to kind of cover for you, especially for the 50% of you that already have some type of long-term care plan. We're going to look at a traditional long-term care plan and explain the components. And I want to explain these components to you just simply because I want you to understand when you're looking at your policies, and it will say type of coverage or inflation protection or elimination period, what all those insurance terms mean and what it means to you. We're going to put this in the form of a good hamburger. And if you're building a good hamburger, you've got to have these components in here. So a good traditional long-term care policy has components. And there's two components, and think of these as the buns. These are the qualifications to go on claim, to mean that you can actually start to receive your benefits in your long-term care policy. The first most common components are what are called activities of daily living. And most policies say if you lose 2 or 3 of these activities of daily living, bathing yourself, toileting, being able to wipe your backside, continence, transferring, meaning getting out of bed into a chair, something like that, feeding or dressing yourself. If you lose 2 or 3 of those, your claim can start. The other way that you could qualify for a long-term care policy is through a cognitive impairment, like dementia or Alzheimer's. And that was the case of my father's. Dementia was what caused his policy to be able to be paid, because he had that cognitive impairment. So if you lose 2 or 3 activities of daily living, or you get diagnosed with a cognitive impairment such as Alzheimer's or dementia, then your long-term care policy kicks in. The meat of the long-term care policy is the amount of money that will be paid towards your claim. Sometimes this is represented in a daily benefit amount of $100 to $300 a day, was what our traditional policy used to be sold for. Other times it could be a pool of money that says you've got $300,000 that you can use for long-term care. So you have this component of your daily benefit. Then on top of that, you've got a length of coverage. So if you have a pool of money, the length of coverage is however much money you've got in that pool, however long that lasts is what you've got coverage for. If you have a daily benefit amount, what you have the ability is on the daily benefit amount, it'll say you get $100, $300, whatever that amount is, they will send or reimburse your nursing home facility there as you go along. Then the length of coverage could be 3 years, 5 years, or lifetime of the policyholder was a traditional way that those policies were held. But then you had an elimination period. An elimination period works just like a deductible on your homeowner's policy. And all of you living in Florida, you know about hurricane deductibles. That hurricane rolls through, you're responsible for the first 1% to 2% of your claim before your insurance company will pay on your claim. The elimination period works similarly. It will say that you're responsible for the first 90 days of your care or the first 180 days of your care before your policy will kick in. Now, most traditional policies have what's called a look back provision. So to give you an example of my father, if my stepmother noticed that he was starting to slip a little bit and noticed that he was becoming more of a risk of getting up at night and wandering off, things like that, she went to the doctor and the doctor said, my father had dementia. That's when that clock starts. Even though he didn't need to go into a nursing facility for much longer after that, because my stepmother was able to keep him at home, the clock starts when the doctor designates that you don't have one of those activities of daily living or you've got a cognitive impairment. That's when that elimination period starts. It's not whenever you finally have to make the decision to go on claim with a policy. But the elimination period is designed to transfer most of the costs early on to you as an individual. It helps to lower the premium in the policy, but it can be quite expensive in the long run. And we'll talk about that in just a moment as well. Then you have in your policies location of coverage. Some policies are just nursing home only policies. And what that means is you don't get coverage unless you are confined to a nursing home. Others have coverage for assisted living facilities, or others even have coverage for home health care. Some policies even have coverage if you want a certain type of coverage or a certain type of care at home. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. Then you get up into your toppings of your burger or some of these extra riders that come with the policy. A biggie is an inflation protection rider. And for those of you who took a policy out 10, 15, 20 years ago, I highly encourage you to have it reviewed to make sure you've got an inflation protection. Because if you took something out at $100 a day 20 years ago, that might have been good. But I'll show you in a moment, the cost per day or per month in a facility in Florida is quite a bit more than that. The inflation protection rider would help increase a policy's coverage 3% a year, 5%. Sometimes it was compound, sometimes it's simple interest. Sometimes it would say, we're going to offer you every 2 years the ability to increase your coverage for an increased premium. But if you waive that ability twice in the policy period, you no longer have that ability to get that coverage anymore. So it's really important that you would keep up with your policies to understand what you had. And so we'll talk about inflation protection because it's to my opinion, it's the most important component that you've got in these policies. And then, as I mentioned, just touched on a little bit before, most policies will pay for skilled nursing care only, meaning that it's a licensed LVN, RN, there'll be some type of skilled nursing facility care, somebody that has some type of licensing or certification. Some policies will pay for non-skilled services, meaning someone just to come cook and clean, someone to help bathe you, things like that, or a family member. So we'll talk about all those are the components of a traditional long-term care policy. Yours may or may not have some of these in there. It's important to understand what's out there before you have to go on claim. But when we define extended care, and Ann set this up perfectly in her little conversation beforehand, extended care goes beyond just nursing home care or a long-term care facility. It can be care in your home. And that's where most people want to be cared for. Or it can be care in an assisted living community. And Florida has a ton of these. They are what I call continuing care communities. It may start out as a senior living where you have your own residence. Everything is cool. You do everything on your own. You can cook if you want to. You can go to the dining facility if you want to, activities, all that kind of stuff. And as you need care progressively, there's somebody on call that can come check on you. Somebody that may come do some housekeeping, things like that. And then as you age and need more care, you've got the ability to still stay in your same surroundings that way. We're seeing more and more of these. We're also seeing more fraternal organizations, church-related organizations, things like that, where they have special communities that if you're a member of that organization, you can also spend your retirement years that way as well. So you're seeing the extended care concept is much broader than what it used to be in the past. Because it's much broader, people think, well, how am I going to pay for this? There are 4 different ways that you can pay for extended care. 1, you can pull it right out of your personal savings. 2, which most people receive, is assistance from friends and family. And I'm not talking about a GoFundMe. I'm talking about your son or daughter or you having to stop your career to come take care of mom or dad or to take care of you in your home. And that's where most people receive that. And I'll show you a really shocking stat here in a moment. Some will go into the Medicaid program. I will tell you from the perspective of what I've seen from most educators, because of your pension, you won't qualify for the Medicaid program. But we'll talk on that in just a moment as well. And then the other option is an extended care coverage plan. And we'll talk about those components in just a moment as well. And people ask me all the time, John, who needs long-term care? We don't know what the future holds. And I will tell you this from the experience of seeing my father. Of course, as we age, and I see this with my mother now, she'll turn 81 in May, you start to see she repeats herself. She's not able to do things that she used to do, but she'll still call me and say, hey, I mowed the front yard today. And it sits on a hill. I'm going, Mom, you're going to hurt yourself, that kind of thing. But she's starting to see where she can't do as many things. And as we age, we have it that way. But also accidents and traumatic brain injuries happen even at a younger age than people anticipate. When I would go visit my father in the nursing home that he first was in right outside of Austin, I noticed that there were people younger than me, and I'm 55, that were in that facility. And so I asked some of the nurses, the attendants there, and they say, this person was in an accident, had a traumatic brain injury. This person had a stroke when they were 40. And so you never know at what age you're going to need some type of care. And that's why it's important to prepare for that. And there are a lot of myths surrounding that care. People think that their health insurance is going to cover it. Health insurance, no matter whether it is through the school district, through your spouse, through a private carrier, has limited to zero long-term care. It's not designed to be a long-term care policy. It's designed to help get you recovered and back on your feet, not for long-term care needs. Some people think that Medicare covers all long-term care costs. I'm going to show you that in a moment, where Medicare has a hard and fast stop on what they'll provide and how they're covering less and less every year. And they get confused with Medicare and Medicaid. They're not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. And then as we've talked about, you never know when you're going to need it. People think, well, I'm just in my 60s or early 70s. I don't need anything yet. I'm too young to buy. And that's great that we feel good, but you never know when you're going to need it and the cost impacted to that. We talk about services, and this is a key component in how you want to spend your later years. Most people, my mother, my father, my stepmother, they all wanted to stay at home as long as they could, and they still want to stay at home as long as they can. You work all your life, and you want to stay in that comfortable surrounding, especially with the spouse, with family members and friends in your community all nearby. You want to be around that. A good plan can help you stay at home. A good plan can keep you connected to your community, to your church. It could be an assisted living facility. It could be in a nursing home. There's good plans can take care of you at every step, wherever you want them to, and they can step up and move with you as you need progressive care. This is a national look at the cost of care because the cost is going up. You can see on a national basis, Mutual of Omaha, which is the FREA preferred provider for long-term care, does a study pretty frequently out there. And this is the national look at care. About $25 an hour for a home health aide, about $6,000 a month in assisted living facility in a single bedroom, single occupancy. A nursing home, you're looking at in a semi-private room about $108,000 a year. A private room, about $123,000 a year. My father was in two very nice facilities. They weren't the Taj Mahal by any stretch of the imagination. They were semi-private rooms, and they were about $6,000 a month. And so it was pretty costly. Thankfully, his long-term care policy took care of all of that. So we were very blessed in that regards. I want you to write this down. I want you to write genworth.com, GENWRTH.com. Write that website down after our webinar today. Go out to that website and take a look at it. You can plug in their cost of care little widget that they've got on their website. You can plug in the city, the zip, the state, whatever you want to do, and it will give you your average cost of care in your area. And you can see here, Panhandle, Central Florida, down to the south. For a home health aide, it varies widely. And it varies widely based on distance as well. The more rural you are, especially with gas prices going up, those costs go up quite a bit. Assisted living facilities, you see, a lot of times it's based on the number of them. If there are a lot of them, the price is lower. If there's not as much or many facilities, those things can be a little bit more expensive as well. So you can see that again. Okay. All right. Someone asked me to share the name of the website. It's genworth.com. And you see it down there at the bottom, GENWORTH, GENWORTH, genworth.com. And then at the top of the website, you can find out there the cost of care or the nursing home cost widget where you can plug in your information there. And then you jump into nursing home care. Nursing home care can get pretty expensive in Florida because there's a lot of demand for it. In the Panhandle, $8,500 a month. Tampa, close to $10,000 a month for a semi-private room. You see Miami's a little bit less expensive. Then once you jump up into the private room, you can see it runs pretty close to the national average. Pretty expensive out there. And you live in the state, it's a great place to live from the weather. It's very comfortable from that perspective. So you get a lot of folks coming down, but then it causes the demand surge on the facilities as well. So that's a great way to look at it. It's a super neat, easy tool to use. Just plug in your zip code even. It'll tell you, it won't give you the facilities around you. It'll just give you an average price around you. And you can understand what's going on out there. Now, Mutual of Omaha, again, who is the preferred provider for FREA, gave me some numbers that said, this is kind of the average to take a look at. So you can kind of understand who takes out a long-term care policy through Mutual of Omaha, a very strong, reputable company. The average age that someone goes on claim or that needs to file a claim to start receiving long-term care benefits is 78. The youngest they've ever had is 27, which blows me away. It could be an accident, but I can't, at age 27, I didn't even think about long-term care. So I'm very impressed with somebody that actually took out a policy at that age. But the average age somebody goes on claim is 78. Women, 3-to-1 or 2-to-1, more than men significantly need to go on claim, mostly because men, when they have a situation, they usually have a fatal heart attack or a stroke, something like that. Women, they need care longer, and so they'll go on more on claim there. The top 3 reasons for care: dementia, again, experienced it with my father, heart disease, and then arthritis. Arthritis really surprised me. It's a mobility issue, it's a pain management issue, and the need to be able to have someone take care of you as well. So those are the reasons that people go on claim, and the reasons that people need care out there. And so when you look at it, you think, well, how am I going to pay for this? And we talked about that elimination period. That elimination period up front is designed for the company to say, you have to pay most of it yourself up front, and then we'll start to pay. It's a way to keep premiums down. Everybody says, oh, that's great. I'll get the lowest price coverage out there. But whenever you need care, the funds may not be available there when you need them. And when I say that is, it's always been positioned to me that first dollar is always the hardest to find. It means sometimes that you may have to sell off some assets. It means that you may have to dip into some savings that you weren't expecting, because you may have a spouse that's still living in the house with you. Those costs to care for your household still go on. It may mean that you have to liquidate an asset like an old 403B or an old 401k or an IRA, something out there that triggers some sort of income tax that you weren't expecting and a loss of future earning results. And think about this, stock market's down double digits for the year in terms of percentage. You may be taking out money that you've lost a lot of money on already. And so you may not want to do that right away. We've seen people in Texas and Oklahoma up through the Midwest, they have family land and they weren't anticipating needing to sell that family land to provide care for a parent. Unfortunately, those things happen. We talked briefly about Medicaid. Again, for most educators, because of your pension, you don't qualify. It is a truly last resort program for people with limited assets. I mean, you've got to be poverty level and below. Some people will try to spend down mom's assets, meaning that they'll say, hey, we're sitting around at Thanksgiving, mom's going to need care here in the next couple of years. Let's sell the house. Let's do all this other stuff, spend down her assets to where she can qualify. What happens is Medicare will look back usually 5 years, or Medicaid will look back 5 years. And they'll say, well, we saw where you did all those activities. You don't qualify. So it's a pretty difficult procedure to qualify for Medicaid. And then what happens is after you go into a nursing home facility, you receive the care, you pass away, the state goes back to your estate and seeks to get the benefits paid back again. So if there's any other life insurance, anything like that, they try to get it back. So Medicaid is not the best way, in my opinion, to try to qualify because of all the hoops they make you jump through. And to be quite honest with you, I'm concerned a little bit about the quality of care. In my father's facility where he was, there were 3 wings. 2 wings were private payer, meaning that they were people paying out of their own assets or they were paying with long-term care. That had a very high patient to staff ratio. The Medicaid wing did not have the same patient to staff ratio. It did not seem to me to be someplace that I would want to put a loved one in a Medicaid wing out there. So that it is available, but again, it's very difficult to qualify for. Now, I want to talk a little bit more in depth about Medicare. Make sure that you understand this concept of how Medicare pays and doesn't pay, okay? Medicare is designed exclusively to pay for your recovery, for you to get better in a skilled nursing care facility after a 3-day hospital stay. I want you to write down the number 3. Remember I told you to write down 100 beforehand? Write down the number 3 next to that 100. I'm going to explain that 3-day hospital stay in a moment. If you had a 3-day hospital stay and you need skilled care after you get out of the hospital, Medicare will cover the total cost, 100%, of that skilled nursing care for the first 20 days. So for 20 days after you get out of the hospital, if you need skilled care to get you back on your feet, feed yourself again, go to the bathroom again, all that kind of stuff like that, Medicare pays 100%. If you're still not ready to go home because you haven't recovered after that 3-day hospital stay, you have a co-insurance clause where you have to pay out of your pocket. It was $185 in 2021. It's out to $194 in 2022 that you'll pay for the remaining period up to 100 days. After 100 days, Medicare stops paying anything. Now, if you remember a slide previous where I said that 47% of people will spend 100 days in a nursing home, this is why. That's all they can afford. They will stay in a nursing home for 100 days because Medicare will pay a portion of that. They'll have to pay the co-insurance clause, $194 in 2022. But then at that point, they're on their own. And the 100% of that expense is borne upon them. So you've got to remember those numbers: a 3-day hospital stay, skilled care for 20 days at 100%, a co-insurance clause for the remainder of the 100 days, and then Medicare pays 0. Well, now let's talk about that 3-day hospital stay. I ask you to write down 3 days. This is how Medicare has changed the long-term care game, and it's not for the better. This is how they cut their costs and keep them low for a specific reason, is that they will classify each procedure in a hospital based on a procedure code. And one year, a knee replacement surgery is classified as an inpatient hospital service, so that you will then get those benefits after you leave the hospital. The next year, they may have changed that to an outpatient procedure. You still may stay 3 days in a hospital, but because it's classified as an outpatient or an observation status procedure, you no longer receive those Medicare recovery benefits, and you're on your own for that care. Every year they add 1,000+ procedures to the outpatient or observation status procedure that still may keep you in the hospital for 3 days, but it eliminates all those aftercare, recovery care type procedures out there. So it's important that you understand that, because that can greatly impact you there. So, all right, Marcia, you ask a question. Is there such a thing as a list of independent living condo locations for retired teachers by state? That's a great question, Marcia. I'm going to have to do some research. Ann and I will do that for you. I do know in Texas, right outside of Waco, there is more of a nursing home community for retired educators. I don't know if it's a condo where you kind of live on your own kind of stuff, but we'll research that, Marcia. That's a great question, because there are becoming more and more that are centered around churches, fraternal organizations, and educator groups, things like that. So we'll see if there's a comprehensive list for you. Great question. All right. So if Medicare doesn't pay and you can't afford to go to a nursing home facility, what happens is that can greatly impact the rest of your family, meaning that it goes beyond just your care, that a family member, a son or daughter, it could be you if your parents are still living, may have to stop their career. They may have to stop working to provide care. And you see that stat up there on the right, that 73% of all long-term care is provided in a home by an informal caregiver who receives no compensation. And you think about dual income families today, you may have been in one. For a female to take off time from their career to take care of a parent, it can set their career back by $300,000 of income, which could impact their pension if they're an educator. It could impact their retirement in the future. So it has a great impact beyond just you receiving the care. It can impact your children. It can impact stress on a family, cause divorce, things like that. So there's so much an impact of not having proper planning that can really trickle down to the family across the board. So there could be the solution with long-term care insurance. You can supplement your expenses through a long-term care policy to help pay for those long-term care expenses. It can protect those assets that maybe you need to have for your other spouse, for your spouse to remain in their standard of living. My stepmother was able to continue to work because my father was being well taken care of. She didn't have to change or sell any assets because my dad had a plan. And keep you connected to those things that matter most. And it enabled my stepmother to go visit my father every night after she got off work. Everything was taken care of, all those things. It was so important that my dad had that plan there, and a good long-term care policy can do those things. A good long-term care policy has some tremendous stay-at-home benefits, providing people to come over to prepare those household tasks like cleaning, cooking, things like that, helping you get bathed, dressed, things of that nature. It can be a skilled home health nurse that comes provide therapy or infusions or wound care, or it could be a non-skilled individual just to come set up with somebody at night if in case they're a wander off risk. Special equipment like walkers, wheelchairs, respirators, adjustable beds. And then my favorite component of a good long-term care policy, we're going to hit on this when we talk about it in our aging in place discussion at the convention in May, is to be able to modify your home to stay at home where you want to be. If it means adding bars, pull-up bars in the bathroom, remodifying a bathroom, widening doors, lowering cooking facilities so that you can do it from a wheelchair, things like that. A good long-term care plan has components that will provide that, pay for that, or also give you someone that is I'm going to almost call it like a concierge care, where they can say, here are providers who will do this for you. Here's a way to do this. Consider this, because they want you to stay where you want to be. They want you to stay at home if that's the place that you want to be. And good plans have that. You can choose in your plans to whether you get cash, where it's just you have to go on claim. They give you cash to use however you want to. Doesn't matter that you get it reimbursed. Or it can reimburse the facility. In my dad's situation, once they got down what the monthly cost was, the insurance company just sent a check to the facility every month for his care out of the insurance proceeds. So again, it's however you want to do that. You can have that taken care of. Some plans will have a little bit modified home health benefit that will say, if you're receiving X dollars a day in a nursing home, you can receive 70% of it in home health care, something like that. So there are a little bit of differences that way. Really doesn't make much difference in the care simply because the cost is lower if you're getting taken care of at home. So we have some common concerns that people talk about. And in Florida, it's a little different. Your Department of Insurance is a little bit what I call squirrely. I know that's not a very technical term. They have some different rules on the books, but we have several that are on this call that are out of state as well. There are some plans that you can get up to 89 years of age. Most long-term care plans stop around 70. Some plans go a little bit longer. If you have health issues already, there are some plans that are less restrictive, even to qualify, that you may not qualify for. Some people, they'll say, I've already got a plan. I just need to cancel it. My premiums keep going up. Do not cancel your policy. Let's review it. You may have some options in there that you didn't realize. You may have some options that even if you stopped paying on it, that you still have coverage even afterwards. So let's make sure that you review that policy and take care of that. So just a couple of quick things before we wrap up here. The older you get, the harder it gets to qualify, to be real honest with you. And once you reach over 75, it's usually a 50-50 because your health may not be as good. You may have more family history that they know about. It's harder for me to qualify for a long-term care plan because my father had dementia. So if you've got family history of dementia and Alzheimer's, those things get to be a little bit more difficult to qualify. And the cost of waiting, the longer you wait, the more expensive the policies become. Don't worry about these numbers. These numbers are just based on a particular set status, set age, set cost, all that kind of stuff. But the numbers go up the longer that you wait. There are other options that are out there that can help those elimination periods, help if you want to be taken care of at home versus a nursing home. If you already have a plan, those options are out there for you as well. There are some unique ways to take care of long-term care, even if you have been declined for long-term care. Some life insurance policies today have an accelerated benefit within the policy that pays for long-term care. Now, let me explain this just real briefly. Say you have a $200,000 life insurance policy. There may be a provision in there that says you can use up to half of your coverage for long-term nursing care. And most of the time it's in a nursing home, not in a home-based situation, if the need arises. So that basically says is that you can take $100,000 of that policy and use it for your long-term care needs today. Then when you pass away, you'll get the balance, your family will get the balance of $100,000. There is an FREA endorsed tax deferred asset protection plan that allows you to use money in that plan to go toward your long-term care policy without any penalty. It's the plan that I have, where I took an old pension plan that I had with a former company, put it into this tax deferred plan so I don't pay taxes on the growth of it. And if I need the money for long-term care, it does two things. It doubles my payout, meaning that if I'm supposed to get $2,000 a month, but I'm going into a long-term care need, I'll get $4,000 a month. And there's no penalty if I need to take out a bunch of money to use for my long-term care needs. So again, it's an FREA endorsed plan. It's a really neat way for those of you who think, you know what, I may have coverage. I don't know if I do, but I don't know if I want to spend it, but I want to protect this money in case I need it. That's what I'm using it for. I want to make sure that I've got protection, but if I don't need long-term care, that's great. I've got a savings vehicle that I can never lose money in. Some people will use their RMDs, or their required minimum distributions, off of another IRA or an old plan to use for long-term care to pay the premiums. That's a great way to do that. You can also, if you have any type of earned income, if you still have a second job or a job after retirement, we've got earned income, you can set up a health savings account, put money into that, which is tax-free, and use those tax-free dollars to buy a long-term care plan. So it's almost like you're getting a 30% savings on a long-term care plan. And then some people will say, I can't qualify for a long-term care plan. I don't know if I've got the type of money I need to put into a tax deferred asset protection plan, but I do need long-term care. Certain cancer, heart, and stroke policies, you can get up to $75,000 in a lump sum if you have one of those health issues, and you can use that for long-term care. So there's other ways that you can take care of that if you need be. So I know we've covered a ton of questions out there. What I'm going to do, if you've got questions, open up, hold your hand up on the reaction bar, and I can answer those for you live. You can put it in the chat if you want to. If you want to find out more about the plans that FREA endorses on your behalf, all you have to do is take your smartphone, open up your camera feature, hover over that QR code. Hover over that QR code, a little form's going to pop up. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. You can fill that out and get that answered. You can also email me down there at the bottom, john.green, and I would be glad to answer any email that you've got at amba.info. And so this is, if you hover over the QR code, and we're going to go back to it in a moment if you didn't get a chance to catch it, this is what that form looks like. You're going to hover over that QR code just like it shows there with your camera. Don't take a picture of it. Hover over it. A little box will pop up at the top. Hit that with your finger. This Florida Retired Educators Association form pops up. All you've got to do is select benefit review. You can put long-term care policy in there. You could put, tax deferred plan if you want to find out about that. You can put whatever you want in there, fill that out. That comes right back to us. Sam, Eric, or Alexander will give you a shout and take care of that for you. So wrapping this up, just a quick reminder, the convention is coming up. Be on the lookout for all the registration for that. We want to see you there May 24th through the 26th. We'll probably go on a limited schedule. Ann and I will in April and May, maybe do one Manic Monday conversation next month and then one in May, because I know there's so much going on that way. We'll do that. So be on the lookout for those topics coming up. If you've got a topic you want us to cover, let me know, let Ann know. We would be glad to build a conversation to help educate you on certain topics there. Tell your friends and former coworkers about these plans, these webinars. It's a great way to introduce them to FREA, help them become a member, help us grow to 11,000 plus as we're getting more and more members all the time. This is a great way. Take this recording, share it with your parents or with your children. Have that discussion. It's important to have that conversation now, because you don't want to do it when it's too late, or you don't want to do it when you're at the Thanksgiving table and you're asking your brother, are you going to chip in $50,000 to take care of mom? Now, I know Ann comes from a big family. They all check in on her mom every day, but not all of us. I know my mom, she relies on my brother and I, but I don't know if she'd want to rely on my brother and I to change clothes, that kind of stuff like that. So we've taken care of her and got her plan that way. So again, thank you for joining us. I'm going to leave this up here. If you've got questions, feel free to drop it in there in chat, and we will be glad to answer those. If there's any on the reaction button, raise your hand. We can do it live. So we'll just keep this up for a few more minutes, and then we'll let you go on your way. So Ann, you want to wrap us up with any conversation, any talking points?
Well, just on that note, as some on here know, my mom is 92. She lives in Muskegon, Michigan, which is a small town, and has established herself in a condominium downtown because she did not want to stay on the farm where I was raised, because it was too far from neighbors and the amenities. So she did do that much planning. And that's kind of, I've used her as an example for my life, is to establish myself in a house that is single story, that has at the most 2 or 3 steps. And so it's just, this is all things to think about. And as we stay in our homes, maybe it's the home where you raised your children. And like our home was, because there were 7 of us, there were 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. For one person, after she lost my dad, she just said, no, I'm done with this. It's 15 miles from town, and Michigan, as you know, loves to have snow. So in the winter, the trip to the grocery store could take as long as 30 to 45 minutes, and it was very dangerous. So you have to think about these things. I mean, we hated to see the old family home go. We hated it. I mean, we were there our whole lives, but it was mom that needed to be safe. And so she sold the house and bought the condominium, and is now is perfectly happy. She has no problems. But you know, as John said, the memory starts going. Mom does not have dementia. She is just short-term memory loss. And so, real personal story. My little brother walked in the hotel or the hallway the other day of the condo, and there was a lot of smoke in the hallway. Well, it was coming from Mom's stove. So she was baking bread for Matt, and she forgot it was in there, and she's in the back room sewing away. And so Matt went running in and rescued the bread. It was a little late for the bread, but the smoke alarm didn't go off. So there was a silver lining on that story. It doesn't take much, guys. So
Exactly.
you gotta be ready for it. I mean, we all gotta be ready.
Exactly. I'm going to leave my email up here. It's john.green@amba.info. Feel free to drop me a line and say, hey, we want more information, have questions, that kind of stuff like that. Use that QR code. We can get it back to you as quickly as possible. And then, and I'm going to wrap it up here. We've got to run to another one of these. So thank you all for joining us today. Everyone take care. Have a great rest of your week. And we look forward to seeing everyone in person here in a couple of months. So everyone take care. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.